Awesome. Cool. Well, welcome back, and thanks for being here. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to try to keep it brief. I just want to talk to you about remote sensing and the art of photogrammetry. So first, I'm going to cover a brief history of photogrammetry and show you some interesting uses of volumetric data today. And then I'll talk a bit more technically about the logic of photogrammetry with some instructions and demos, so you can learn how to shoot for your own 3D reconstructions that you're going to do tomorrow. So first, what is remote sensing? Remote sensing is the process of detecting the physical characteristics of an area by measuring either its reflected or emitted radiation at a distance. So typically this refers to satellites or aircrafts or oceanographic research vessels that are equipped with some special cameras that researchers can sense things about the Earth. But remote sensing really can be any measurement process of an object without coming into direct contact with it. So traditional photography, for example, is a type of passive remote sensing. Passive sensors can measure energy that is naturally available and reflected. So currently you're remote sensing me as a subject because of the light available in the room around me. But we also have active remote sensing sensors that have two components. They have an emitter and a sensor to capture the reflected waves. So a good example of that, for example, is Apple's Face ID, which uses LIDAR to illuminate your face with an array of near-infrared light dots. They're so fast, and they measure, and then there's a sensor that measures how quickly that dot reflects back to the sensor, which is called time of flight. So this difference in the quick laser return times and wavelengths is what gets translated into a 3D point cloud representation of your face, and that's how the phone knows to unlock your screen. So you might ask, what is a point cloud? Point clouds, I'm just going over the very basics in case nobody knows what I'm talking about. They are just volumetric data sets organized in an XYZ coordinate system.
Before I get on with the task in hand and finish.
So this describes a kind of volumetric data set of how data or information is structured in a three-dimensional space. So you're all familiar with pixels, like our camera feed right now is transmitting through pixels. They're the building blocks of 2D digital space, and they only have a width and a length. Whereas voxels are kind of like 3D pixels. They give your object a width, length, and a depth, therefore giving volume to the information, which gives us a closer representation of reality. So what is photogrammetry in that context? It's a form of passive remote sensing because it uses light. So it's derived from the three Greek words photo, graphein, and metron, which literally mean light, write, and measure. Hence, we can deduce that photogrammetry is the science of measuring an object from light. And since light is necessary for us to see, we can say that photogrammetry maps reality through the act of seeing. And this actually dates way far back to the foundational laws of perspective, back in 1030 AD with Al-Hazin, who is considered the father of modern optics, because he explained the principle of the camera obscura, or the pinhole image, as this natural phenomenon that occurs when an image of a scene is projected through a small hole onto an opposing screen in inverted and reversed form. So from the late 1500s to the 1700s, the camera obscura was the first technology that was actually perceived as a kind of knowledge machine, or a device that would allow people to determine what is objectively true. And of course, the laws of perspective have also been used in drawing methods. Like in 1525, Dürer created this instrument that can be used to plot the correct proportions of an object in perspective with a set of strings. So you can imagine how people were plotting things back then. And then this resulted back in what I like to call manual point clouds of the 15th century. So this is before the advent of photography or the ability to measure with light. Sculptors had to solve this measurement accuracy problem in a manual way. So to do this, they used what they called pointing machines, like the one you see on the left, to make one-on-one copies of modeling clay, wax, or plaster that they would then carve into wood or stone. So these devices allowed them to literally replicate and transfer the exact positions, dimensions, and proportions, essentially producing a kind of volumetric data set that they could transfer onto larger models. So this is, for example, how the rock face of the US presidents were carved on Mount Rushmore. And then in the 19th century, photography was invented, and with that, the advent of photogrammetry. The daguerreotype camera, which is essentially a camera obscura or a pinhole camera with a lens, was responsible for the first technical image using the laws of perspective to represent reality. We can actually say that this camera was the first black box apparatus signaling the coming of the digital revolution. And now today we have the AI black box that can generate fake technical images. So it's an interesting parallel to think about. But back to the history, so 60 years after the advent of the camera, photogrammetry started being used in the field of land surveying and architectural mapping. So Dr. Albert Moyenbrid just developed this first wide-angle lens camera, and photographs from this camera were used by map makers to map the terrain by intersecting and plotting ground control points directly onto the photographs. And then another 50 years later, the military started placing cameras on planes and using aerial photography to produce accurate maps of land. So here we have a very important concept of stereoscopy, which was the first time it was used in photogrammetry. And it uses the same principle as human vision, like how our eyes are offset in order to extract elevation of an object or a scene. So this is very important in photogrammetry because this overlap, as you'll see when you shoot, is really important to get of your scene because you need the different perspectives in order to achieve dimension and elevation in your final models. And this is just a fun side note because I love animal cams and flying images. In 1903, Julius Numbeter designed this tiny breasted mounted camera for carrier pigeons. This was the first kind of animal cam. And this camera would be set to take automatic exposures at 30-second intervals as the pigeon would fly along the city. This was the first basically aerial photography that people were able to see their cities from above, and they were printed as postcards and became very popular images. And another side note is that aerial photography was also used by the Bavarian Pigeon Corps in World War I to tell where the enemy lines were. So we've been using animals as spies for quite a while. And then we have digital photogrammetry today. Since 2010, it's advanced quite a lot, and it works by computing 3D models from hundreds of images taken from an object from 360 degrees. Here is a screenshot from Reality Capture, which is one of the most advanced photogrammetry softwares today. There's also lots of open source ones, which will teach you how to use so you don't have to pay millions of dollars. So how does it actually work? So it starts with camera calibration, taking multiple images in which the system detects points of interest and matches them in 3D space. This process is repeated millions of times for all the points until a sparse and then a dense point cloud are produced. So from these points, the software can build a mesh of polygons that can then be optimized to produce final 3D meshes, textures, and models. And of course, this data can also be extracted from a movie, which is essentially a sequence of still images. So most of the sophisticated photogrammetry softwares today will allow you the option to upload a video, which the software decodes to find the best paired images. And this computer vision technique is called structure from motion, which actually really closely mimics the way that biological vision works in our own brains, in that it basically projects a 2D moving image onto our retinas in order to construct a 3D structure of space in our brains. So all of these are analogs from biological to digital. We also have drone photography, which is super advanced, and it allows architects to map 3D maps of landmarks and locations. We mentioned the Microsoft Flight Simulator in the previous lecture. That's over 200 gigabytes of reconstructed data used as a PC game. And then it's also worth to mention that the development of photogrammetry is and has always been largely funded by the military since the very beginning. But even in 2019, this photogrammetry technique from the Army Corps of Engineers, they announced that they're able to make 3D maps from aerial footage in just minutes. So it's a really good reminder to think about how these tools that we get to play with and create creative narratives around actually originate from humanity's hunger for war. Of course, there are also good use case scenarios like preservation. Photogrammetry is used a lot for historic sites, like this 36,000-year-old cave in France, which is actually closed to the public, but can be experienced through 3D scans. Since the humidity of our bodies would actually damage the structure of those drawings, it's actually safer for the rocks that we experience them in this three-dimensional way. Or you have the pyramids of Giza that you can also visit and experience kind of with really great accuracy and texture. And then in the visual effects industry, interestingly enough, photogrammetry is used to construct 3D models of avatars of actors that they can then rig to animate. So this, for example, is how they were able to recreate Tarkin in Star Wars Rogue One. They found a cast of the actor after he died, a face cast, and they 3D scanned it, photogrammetry it, and then animated him back to life in the film. So just some thoughts again around like mortality and how these ephemeral bodies or objects or spaces can be reanimated or brought back to life in the digital space. And this brings us back to some of the more exciting uses of the technology today for me. For example, this is video, volumetric video capture that uses 3D motion in real time. So what I've described so far addresses the still scan, but a lot of these new studios are building rigs like the one you see on the left to capture motion in 3D. So you can imagine that this has incredible potential for AR and VR because it kind of completely eliminates the single camera vantage point to the action and allows an actor to act with their full bodies since they're seen from all points of view. I shared a really interesting TED Talk. Hopefully you guys got to see it on the Arena. That kind of shows you how moving through a volumetrically shot space like this allows us to change camera perspectives in a way that a traditional camera never can. There's also a lot of commercial 3D scanners available as an active remote sensor, which I mentioned at the beginning. They're used LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Like I mentioned before, it's commonly used in Face ID, but also to generate large-scale point clouds. Like you can think of LIDAR as light-based radar. So these devices are often used in architecture and attached to airplanes and drones to produce highly accurate environmental maps. Like the image that you see here on the right of this football field was scanned with 6 different placements of LIDAR where those black dots are, with the device that you see on the right. And these LIDAR devices are also the eyes of self-driving cars, which I think is important to think about because there's over 10 million self-driving cars on the road today, and that number is estimated to grow by 42 billion in the US by 2025. So many of these self-driving cars use LIDAR on the top to construct real-time 3D map of space. And like Provides mentioned in the intro, this light-based method does create shadow gaps, which can obstruct the car's vision. Like you can see these shadows behind the light that is not bouncing back. But because all of these cars are connected in one system, they share point cloud models in real time, and they can produce with each other a real-time experience of space. So it's just an interesting thing to think about in terms of collaborative vision, also as a metaphor for yourself as you're sharing models of spaces. And speaking of collaborative vision, maybe some of you have heard of the work of Forensic Architecture, which is a multidisciplinary research agency based in London. And they're investigating human rights valuation through the use of spatial and architectural analysis. And one of the techniques that they employ is reconstruction of contested events from social media footage. So, for example, like this event during the Gaza war on August 1st, 2014, they used videos from social networks to reconstruct the Israeli shelling, which killed many Palestinian civilians. And this project was actually really foundational to inspiring current and how we consider social implications of using data points from multiple perspectives to kind of heighten the resolution of a space or truthfulness of an event. Then we have fun stuff in the art and film industry. So a lot of artists are using this technology to make films, installations, and VR. Liam Young's Where the City Can't See was one of the first fiction films shot entirely through laser scanning technology of a self-driving car. Then The Ship of Gods is an installation using 3D laser scanning technology and Arctic mapping data to reimagine ships scanned in these life-size boats. And they're installed as kind of ephemeral light vessel installations. Maybe some of you are familiar with Marshmallow Laser Feast Studio. Basically, one of their projects, In the Eyes of an Animal, imagines what a forest might look like from different animal perspectives. And they place you inside of this VR environment where you're experiencing a point cloud model of a forest in this kind of very ephemeral, magnetic way. Super enchanting. Here's a video done by a team in Berlin. They make photogrammetry scans of the graffiti on the streets of Kreuzberg, and then they ran that photogrammetry scan through a simulation in order to kind of comment on the gentrification that's happening in Berlin over the last few years. As prices of the housing go up, the graffiti sort of disappears and the vibrant street culture disappears. I think this is a fun example of like the kind of resolution you can get with once you take your photogrammetry scan, what you can do to simulate it in order to communicate your point or idea. This photogrammetry guy has been is based in Turkey, Asbabian, and he's been producing really high resolution photogrammetry scans of all kinds of interior and exterior spaces for many years now. So you can see, check out his portfolio and how like incredibly detailed some of these scans are and what kind of information you can achieve yourself just from photographing spaces. Pretty cool. It looks like incredibly realistic, but you can also fly around it and defy gravity. So that's fun. Of course, there's hundreds of databases for 3D scans already of natural objects and bodies. You can find many models on Sketchfab and Pixel Megascans, which is free if you have an Unreal Epic Games login. And I think the open source movement of the digital world really aims at decentralizing the ownership of information and data. So really thinking about how we can learn from each other and what we can do collaboratively as we share access to information and these scans. So feel free to explore those two databases. And quick overview of the workflow, I'm gonna go through that. So how does it work? We're gonna pick what you wanna capture, photograph the object from every step, I'll show you how, process the photos, and then you'll have your 3D objects at the end. So really, you don't need a lot more than a camera, which you can use your smartphone for. Computer, there's many phone apps, which I'll demo right now how to use if you wanted to use an app and their cloud-based systems. But for more accurate and high resolution scans, I would recommend taking photographs and then working with the guys tomorrow who will demo how to process them in Mushroom. And also, final material to remember with photogrammetry is you gotta have a lot of patience because it takes a while to process. So like, don't worry if things are taking forever, give it time and let the machine do its thing. So kind of step by step, charge your cameras, download the scanning apps, or use photographs. Pick the environment. You can scan multiple environments if you want, or compositions. So when you're taking photos of the compositions, make sure you're doing it from all different angles. So if it's one single object, circle around the composition. Take one step every 60% because you want that overlap of images. What I mentioned about stereoscopy, you have to have at least 60% overlap from one image to the next. And don't break the line of movement. So you want to make sure you're consecutive with your image numbers. That'll make it easier for the algorithm to process your images. Like here, you can see if you're scanning a facade, don't stand in one space, like move around the facade one step at a time. If you're scanning an interior space, don't stand in 4 different positions, move actively around the space one step at a time and make sure you have 60% overlap. And if you're scanning an object, circle around it from all points of views and 3 different levels. Later, when you're done with your images, check that they're in full resolution. If you're sending them to yourself, make sure that you're not compressing them because you'll get much more out of high resolution images than compressed images. Upload the photos, process the scans, and then clean up and optimize your model, which you'll do tomorrow. So here are some phone apps that you can use if you wanted to just try it for the sake of like, how does it work? I suggest doing this first with a small object. I'll show you this just as quick demo video of how they work. One is for Android, Scan 3D, and the other is for iPhone, Trinio. Let me know if there's sound.
Basics of photogrammetry, we are ready to try it ourselves. So for this hands-on portion, you're either going to need Scan 3D if you're using an Android, or Trinio if you're using an iPhone. This first demo that I'm showing is how to shoot with just your own photographs. So as you can see, I'm taking a step at every point around the object, and I'm making sure to have at least 60% overlap between the shots. Then, when I'm ready to upload the photos, I make sure to select them in order. So if you don't do that and you mess up like I did 14 before 15, I can correct myself. This method allows the software to see that the photos are uploaded in order. Once you've uploaded them, you can wait for the software to finish them. This scan took about an hour, and that's the final product. Now we're going to use ARKit, which is a built-in interface in Trinio. You're going to move very slowly around the object and make sure that the points are registered, every point across it. This is a very easy way to make sure that the software really gets all the angles. For this method, you don't need to take individual photos. You can see there's a loading bar on the bottom, so as you circle around the object, it fills right up. After you've added the photos, you can upload them and wait for the queue and the creation of 3D. This is the final product of the Trinio ARKit option scan. And now I'm going to show you how to do it with Scan 3D. I don't have an Android, so I use my grandma's, but you can see that the process is similar, where you have to make sure that the dots are green before you manually take a photo. The overlaid interface is very helpful in showing you when you might be not in the correct position. If you ever see red dots, don't worry, just reposition your camera back until the dots are green or yellow and then manually take a photo. When you're done, press the check mark and allow your scan to process. Be aware that this may take some time, so just be patient. And at the end, we again have a 3D mesh and model. Because Scan 3D processes on the device, it might take longer to produce, but don't worry, it will work eventually. Just be patient.
Yeah, I keep reiterating that patience is really key with photogrammetry, so don't forget that, don't get frustrated. Things are taking forever. So that was a way of doing it with phone apps. I do recommend trying that with just a single object so you can get a sense of how the camera needs to be positioned around an object before you start scanning your environment. Here is a quick demo of how to scan single objects and the kind of loops you need to make around it. So you can see that I'm doing, again, I'm going to reiterate, like 60% overlap between each shot. So I'm taking one step and then I move to the next circle. So I make one consecutive circle and then I go up to the top and I make another consecutive circle at every step. And what I do at the very end, if I want to get more higher resolution of the textures, is to zoom in and get like a real nice close-up, but don't do that at the very end after you've photographed your whole object from every position. And I think I have one more app I want to show you. So for those of you who have newer iPhones, 13 and up, they're equipped with LIDAR sensors on the back, or the iPad Pro. So this is Polycam. It's an app that uses that LIDAR scanner, and it's really nice because it has a visual overlay of that navigates you as you scan, so you can see it in real time, and it also immediately processes. It takes some time, but it does work. And then you can share the final models as GLBs for free, or there's a 7-day free trial, which I highly recommend because you can extract different formats like point clouds or objects or meshes that are much easier to work with. It also has this option to crop and clean up your models. And then here on the left, once we can like plug them into Houdini and do simulations with them, which is super fun. So final reiterations, photogrammetry do's. Don't forget the consecutive circles and taking one single step for the 60% overlap. That's the concept of stereoscopy, that your eyes overlap with one another. Make sure the object is always fully in frame, zoom in at the very end for detail texture, and even lighting is really helpful. So not having harsh shadows will generate better textures that don't look weird in your environment. It's helpful if you don't have some moving objects in the background, which might be difficult if you're scanning outside, but definitely try to limit the motion that happens because it confuses the algorithm. Reflective surfaces also don't scan very well. So if you want to scan something reflective, you can use a matting spray. And then keep your photos in order, be consecutive in taking them, upload them in the right order, and then if you want to zoom more details on the way out and in. So as you're zooming in for details and then zoom back out. And again, don't compress your images. This will really screw you up if you compress them. And then here's some databases and free softwares that you can use. And tomorrow after you shoot, I think the guys are going to go over how to process the shooting in Mushroom, I believe. I'll share all of these links on the on Discord. And that's it. I did it in 30 minutes. I didn't want to keep you too long. Do we have any questions?
Ellie, may I add something? First,
Yeah.
Polycam, like Ellie said that it's for new iPhones, but it also works on old ones like mine. Just use the camera and it works like good old school photogrammetry. And I think it's the best phone app for photogrammetry.
Do you mean the front-facing camera?
Sorry?
Are you talking about the front-facing camera of older iPhones?
No,
Polycam?
they implemented photo mode. So they taking a photo and they taking these photos automatically. So they gathering the data from your accelerometer and position, and they taking a photo at certain points where photogrammetry should better work. So that's why this is better app right now for the phone and photogrammetry for iPhone.
Yeah, Polycam. Yeah, but like I said, you can also just take photographs and then upload those photographs and process them. So, and that actually, if you take lots of photographs, will generate higher resolution models. Like I think that Polycam is great and all the phone apps are great, but they don't give you very high resolution models. So you can achieve, I think, a lot more interesting effects if you were to take your own photographs and process them through Mushroom, but it's obviously up to you guys. You can try them all and see what works for you.
Yeah, that's true. And also there was, like you said that all the photographs should be in order. I think it's like not obligatory. It's better to have it.
Maybe it's for Trina,
yeah,
but most of the software working
they compare all photos with each other, so the order is not that needed, but I think it will see if you have the correct order.
And another thing, what's important is why you should save the high-res photos is this software needs your EXIF information embedded in photo file. Like most of the time, it's camera lenses, the size of sensor, and all this info is really helping the software. So
yeah, because it generates information about the aperture and the distance and location. So don't compress them. I've made the mistake in the past where I have a lot of photos and I'll try to like telegram them to myself to get them from my phone to my computer, but that compresses them and it extracts all that information, which makes it difficult for the software to recompute. So it's better to either like directly plug in, if you're taking photos on your phone, directly plug them into your computer, or we transfer them at a full rate, or use another cloud service that's not going to compress your images.
And what's interesting, there is no difference between the approaches to photogrammetry object or interior is still circle. Because I saw a lot of times like people doing photogrammetry of the room, and they're standing in the center of the room and looking around. And this is the main mistake with that, because photogrammetry needs moving. So if you shift position, it's gonna work. If you rotate on one place, it's not given any information about the depth. So it's just making a panorama of. So yeah, these two images is your friends. It's really working like this, even with really complicated interior. It's still something like this. You can imagine that you shooting invisible object in center of the room, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're facing your back is kind of to the interior wall space, and you're facing inward and shooting at every step, essentially. And then also, Yanzi, you would do that at different levels too, right? Like you would do on the bottom, the middle, and the top, or would you only stick to one position in the middle?
Yeah, each of these points could be like 3 photos. For example, you're shooting up, in front, and you're shooting like a little bit of the floor. And in each position, you're doing the same ritual. So this is really meditative process. But if you have LIDAR is good for big spaces. Like you can LIDAR scan how we walk home, and it's working good on the big spaces.
Yeah, and you guys can team up. Like if one of your team members has a LiDAR scanner in their phones, or somebody else doesn't, like you can split it. You know, some people can photogrammetry smaller objects, others can do environments. It's really up to you, but you just use your resources, distributed resources, to get more out of the data and your team. Any questions? Thoughts? Been sitting for so long. Tomorrow's going to be more fun when you go out and actually shoot, I swear.
And if you have some good cameras, you can take to test. You can just for the test reasons, you may check how these models differs from each other. Like Polycam and Canon 6000D or whatever.
Yeah, and compare the phone and the camera. Reconstruction in Polycam or on computer, so it's always interesting to test.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of location, do you guys have any ideas of where you want to scan, what environments you want to scan? Something to think about maybe tonight before you go out into the world tomorrow.
Yeah, I think tomorrow we will walk around Matadero, because it's a really nice site here. But
Cool.
during the week you can make scans or whatever, wherever you like. Not only here, so you can.
Yeah, I think we just show how it's working, how to better these photos, and then
Awesome.
grab whatever environment you have, like on your location, and fun fact is that you can even not go anywhere. For example, we use in our current video like 50% of environments we reconstructed, it was just videos from YouTube. Like there is videos, lonely person walking around Tokyo, 4K, 2 hours, and you can process this data through these algorithms, and it's the same actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just cut it into frames, and then it's just the same photos, like if you shoot it by yourself. So it's a nice way to add something you cannot shoot by yourself.
Cannot reach.
I mean, this is something you can also experiment too, is taking videos instead of photos, and then taking out those frames yourself. Or some of the softwares actually allow you to upload the videos and then they extract the shots from them. So, but it is nice that you can go anywhere in the world. So thinking of any kind of camera footage from a remote location that you might want to integrate into your scene. If you find a video of it online, you can reconstruct that environment as well.
Yeah, you can also type, for example, drone footage is always gonna work for photogrammetry. So yeah, you can just test different approaches.
Cool. Any questions? Thoughts? Ideas?
Let's kick it.
Well,
See you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Let's meet tomorrow.
What time?
yeah, thanks for sticking through this first day, guys. It's exciting to have you all here, and we're super stoked to see what you make. Reach out to us on Discord. Bye.